Cincinnati would be having a better season if Joe Burrow hadn't dyed his hair. Hello, welcome to NFL Picks and Predictions Week 18. I'm Napoleon reporting to you from my closet. This is the final week of the regular season. There are definitely a lot of games where it's like, okay, there's no reason to watch this. This is kind of pointless because both teams are not really going to the playoffs. The game really doesn't matter. It's all about who finishes off the season with the worst record. But at this point, you want to be the team that finishes with the worst record if you're not going to the playoffs because they'll put you higher up on the list for draft picks for the 2025 season. Most of the playoff picture for both the AFC and the NFC has been filled, except the AFC, they're just trying to determine that number 7 seed, and the NFC, they actually have all the wild card spots filled, but it's probably the number 4 seed that is still trying to be filled, and that is to determine the winner of NFC South. So there are some games this week that will determine if a team is going to the playoffs at all, but some games, there will still be teams competing to try to get a better spot in the playoffs. So there's definitely going to be some really great games this week. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's get started with my picks for the final week of the NFL 2024 season. So starting with the Saturday games, we've got Cleveland Browns and Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore is a huge favorite to win this game. Point spread for them is minus 17.5. Honestly, a lot of us expect this game to be a complete blowout. Baltimore's just going to come out and trample Cleveland. Now, Baltimore has already clinched a playoff berth, but they want to win this game, because if Baltimore wins this game, they would win AFC North. And they really want to win the division to get that number 3 seed and definitely have home field advantage in the wild card round. Cleveland really hasn't been that much. Some people thought that they were starting to play better when they got Jameis Winston as their starting quarterback, but that didn't really prove to be the case. He seemed to kind of be one of those one-hit wonders, kind of like Andy Dalton was with Carolina earlier in the season when he became their starting quarterback. So, I really do not expect Cleveland to win this game, although I was surprised how when Baltimore played Cleveland earlier in the season, Cleveland actually pulled an upset. And that was one of the games that is keeping the AFC North competitive between Baltimore and Pittsburgh. In fact, most people going into the season automatically assumed Baltimore would win the AFC North. But Pittsburgh has really given them some competition. And a few weeks ago, I thought the AFC North was Pittsburgh's to lose. But then Baltimore started playing better. They started upping their game some. And then Pittsburgh, they just started to fall a little bit. I know they have had to deal with a couple of injuries. I know that Justin Fields and TJ Watt got hurt this season, which definitely had a bad impact on some of their games. But not only that, it's just Pittsburgh is not really the team that we saw them as earlier in the season. And unfortunately, even though they are definitely going to be in the playoffs, probably get a wild card spot, as they're easily looking at the number 5 or 6 seed right now, I think that there's a good chance they will go down in the wild card round. I just kind of think they're where Philadelphia was last season. They're just kind of struggling, and they're just starting to fall towards the end of the season, and that's really not what you want. I actually think that it would not be a bad bet to maybe go point spread on Cleveland. Just seeing how the point spread is so wide, I mean, it's not a bad idea. But this game, I would only do conservative estimates regardless of where you bet. So I'd say only put a small number of chips on point spread for Cleveland or money line for Cleveland. In fact, I'd go really conservative on that bet because guess what? They're probably not going to win, but if they shock the world, then you bet $10 with the plus 1,000 odds on money line for Cleveland. You're going to win $100 off that game, which is pretty good for one day. And if you lose, hey, you just lost $10. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure if Baltimore will blow up the scoreboard, and I really don't think Cleveland cares to win the game. At this point, I think they're okay with finishing the season 3-14, so they'll be right at the top of the list for draft picks the following season. While Baltimore could win the game by 3 points or 30 points, I think this is going to be a very easy game for the Ravens. So as far as who just wins, I'm going with Baltimore on this one. I think they will finish the season 12-5, secure the number 3 seed in the AFC, and definitely be in a good position going into the wild card round of the playoffs, and have a really good chance of moving on to the divisional round in the playoffs. So moving on to the later Saturday game, we've got Cincinnati Bengals and Pittsburgh Steelers. Cincinnati is a very small favorite to win this game. Point spread for them is minus 1.5. So, as you probably know, Cincinnati is still in the hunt in the AFC for the playoffs, and they do need a lot of miracles to make the playoffs, and I personally don't think they will. But I am kind of surprised that they've been able to hold on this long, because I really thought it was going to be over for them last week with Denver, that Denver would lock up that last spot in the AFC, and that it was all over for Cincinnati, but Cincinnati showed them otherwise, and that was definitely one of the most exciting games I saw last week. As far as it goes for this game, Pittsburgh beat Cincinnati when they played them earlier in the season, but it was not by a lot. It was a one-score game, and Cincinnati still kept it competitive the whole time, but it pretty much ended like both the games Cincinnati had with Baltimore this season. They came close, but then they just fell short at the end. And to be honest, I'd say about half the losses Cincinnati has had this season were self-inflicted. And the commentators even say, with some of the statistics Joe Burrow has, he should be winning a lot more. They should have a much better record than 8-8 this season. If you ask me, their record should be about 12-4 right now. But it is what it is, and for this game, even though Pittsburgh has been struggling more lately, I think that they are going to try to play a little bit harder. I do think that they will play a little bit better this game. Keep in mind that even though Pittsburgh hasn't done great the last couple of games, they did play Baltimore and Kansas City, who are two of the best teams right now, so you can't give them too much crap for losing those games. Although I did think Pittsburgh would beat Baltimore, Pittsburgh tends to beat Baltimore most of the times they play them. With that being said, Pittsburgh's sitting at 10-6. They really want this game, and I think they will bring a lot more to the field than we saw from them the last couple of weeks. Because if Baltimore loses the game before theirs, Pittsburgh knows if they win, both finish the season 11-5, and then Pittsburgh breaks the tie in the AFC North. But even if Baltimore wins, which it does look like they will, Pittsburgh knows that if they can still win the game and still finish the season 11-6, that they will still be able to secure that number 5 seed in the AFC, which whoever gets the number 5 seed in the AFC will play Houston. So we know that Pittsburgh is in a fight with the Los Angeles Chargers to get that number 5 seed, because Los Angeles still has a chance, and the commentators were saying, if you are a Los Angeles fan, you want to be cheering for Cincinnati right now, because Cincinnati kept Denver from overtaking Los Angeles for the number 6 seed in the AFC, and now Cincinnati can stop Pittsburgh from Los Angeles taking the number 5 seed in the AFC. So even though they have clinched playoff berths, there is still a fight to get a better position going into the playoffs. And at the end of the day, I do think that Cincinnati will try hard to just stay in the hunt. Like I said, they do need a lot of miracles, so even if they win the game, they won't necessarily be in the playoffs, but they will not officially be eliminated until some of the games on Sunday, depending on how those games turn out. But as far as it goes for this game, I think it will be fun to watch. I think it will be competitive, but seeing that Pittsburgh has home field advantage this time, I think that they will do probably just as good, maybe a little bit better than they did when they played Cincinnati earlier in the season. So for this game, I'm going to have to go with Pittsburgh. I do think that it is somewhat of a toss-up, because I know Pittsburgh has been struggling some, and I know that Cincinnati has been playing a little bit tougher the last few weeks. I would say use your best judgment on the game doing the bets. I would say maybe bet at most a medium number of chips on money line for Pittsburgh. It is even odds, so you will double your money if they win the game, but I would not go too heavy when it comes to the betting on this game, because it will be close. Just in case Pittsburgh screws up, I don't want anyone taking too much of a loss. Please bet wisely on this game, and as I say, only bet what you can afford to lose. So, moving on to the Sunday games. First game, we've got Houston Texans and Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is a very small favorite for this game. Point spread is -1. This game really does not matter at all, so I don't really want to spend time on a lot of games like this that obviously have no impact on the playoff picture, that are almost just for funsies. Obviously, the odds are pretty much close because people would see Houston as a better team, but they're not really going to be trying because they know that they've locked in that number 4 seed and that they're not going to change positions in the playoff picture for the AFC, regardless of the outcome of this game. So as far as it goes for Tennessee, I think they're in the same boat as Cleveland. They don't really mind finishing the season at 3-14 at this point. And as far as it goes for Houston, I don't really know their logic. They might think, well, we want to win. We want to finish 10-7. This game doesn't really matter much. I don't care about who's playing, who's not playing. I'm not going to be paying a lot of attention to this game at all. And any bets that I would suggest to make on this game, I'd say only do a small number of chips. Whether you do point spread or money line for either team. Both of them have -110 odds on money line for either team. I'd say if you feel like betting, just bet a small number of chips on whatever team you think is going to win. And pretty much just bet for fun on this game, because that's all I would do. And I've got to choose who I think is going to win the game, so I'm just going to go with Tennessee. My only reasoning for this is because Houston was supposed to beat Tennessee when Tennessee played them earlier in the season. And while I do think that Tennessee wasn't playing great, I feel like them winning was more Houston beating themselves. I feel like that loss was self-inflicted. And I do think, seeing this game, that Tennessee has home field advantage, and seeing that Houston's not going to bring their A game to the field, I think that they're just going to let Tennessee win the game. So that's all I've got to say about that one. Moving on to the next game, we've got Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta is a pretty good favorite to win this game. Point spread for them is -8. So this is definitely a game you want to pay attention to because, as you know, Atlanta lost to Washington on the Sunday night game last week, which knocked them back below Tampa for the NFC South. And in the playoff picture, Tampa's currently leading the division. They currently have the number 4 seed, but Atlanta is still in the hunt, because if Atlanta wins the game, Tampa loses on Sunday, then Atlanta breaks the tie, and they will end up getting that number 4 seed in the NFC. So they really want to win this game, and even though Carolina hasn't really been playing like the worst team in the NFL the last few weeks, I know that's not saying a lot, but they definitely have done better than a lot of people, including myself, have expected out of them. This game, though, however, Atlanta's got home field advantage. They're going to be fired up. Carolina's not really trying to bring their A game to the field. Carolina does anything, it would just be for bragging rights, to be like, hey, we kept Atlanta out of the playoffs, but I don't really think they care too much about that at this point. Since Atlanta has home field advantage, I think that they would win either way, but I think that they're going to do a pretty good job, that they're going to beat Carolina pretty well. And I do have to say that, as of now, Atlanta actually has been playing better with Michael Penix Jr., I think that's how you say his name, but he seems to be doing better with Atlanta than Kirk Cousins was. Although Kirk Cousins started out pretty good early in the season, later on he just kept throwing too many interceptions, and they were like, okay, let's try this guy. We gotta still make the playoffs. We still have a chance. So I think Michael Penix Jr. is going to do a great job against Carolina on Sunday, and they were doing a pretty good job against Washington too last week. In fact, I actually thought Atlanta was going to beat Washington, but Washington, they did keep it competitive. It went to overtime. Washington ended up with the W, but it was still a very exciting and very fun game to watch. But I think that Carolina is going to be a much easier team to beat than Washington. So for this game, I'm going to have to go with Atlanta. I think they will go to 9-8, and that they will keep their chances alive at going to the playoffs and being that number 4 seed in the NFC. So then we've got New Orleans Saints and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa is the favorite. Point spread for them is -13. So this game is also going to be another one I am looking forward to watching. Obviously, Tampa knows they have to win this game to win the NFC South and secure that number 4 seed, possibly the number 3 seed in the NFC, which I'll talk more about that a little bit later. New Orleans, I don't really think that they care too much at this point. Obviously, this game has little to no impact on them for the following season, but they do know if they finish at 6-11, that would put them a little bit lower on the list for draft picks the following season than if they finish the season 5-12. So I don't really know what their logic is, where they're going at this point. I know there's all these rules in the NFL about, like, you try to lose to get earlier draft picks, you could get fined, blah, blah, blah. I don't know the whole rules. When it comes down to it, I do think since the point spread is kind of wide, it would not be a bad idea to maybe do a small bet on point spread for New Orleans. And also, if you want to do a small bet on money line for New Orleans, it's got very good underdog odds, plus 550. It is very possible that Tampa could cover the spread. I know that it's a wide point spread, but when you saw the game that they had when they played New Orleans earlier in the season, New Orleans was keeping it competitive, but when it got to the second half, mostly in the fourth quarter, Tampa was all over them. Tampa won that game 51-27. And then think about the other blowout wins they had, like against the Los Angeles Chargers and last week against the Carolina Panthers. So Tampa could very well blow up the scoreboard this game. They know that they've got to win. They know that they need this game to win the NFC South and go to the playoffs. It is very possible they could blow up the scoreboard. It's possible they could do better than they did when they played New Orleans earlier in the season. If they did as good as they did when they played at Caesars Superdome earlier this season, they might actually do better since they are playing at Raymond James Stadium on Sunday. I don't know what the final score would be. That's why I'd say only do a small number of chips if you want to bet anything on this game. But as far as who's getting the win, I'm going to have to go with Tampa. I think that they will be able to finish the season 10-7 and secure their spot in the playoffs and win the NFC South for the 4th season in a row. Let's see what Baker Mayfield can bring to the field on Sunday. So then we've got Buffalo Bills and New England Patriots. Buffalo is a small favorite to win this game. Point spread for them is -2.5. This game really does not matter. Buffalo has already secured the number 2 seed. New England probably doesn't really care about losing. If they finish the season 3-14, they're going to be tied with some of the other teams for worst record in the season, which will automatically put them towards the top of the list for the following season for draft picks, and I know that they want that. New England doesn't really care about winning. If this game was to be more competitive, like if there was more on the line that would impact the playoff picture, I'd say New England actually would have a chance, because New England kept that game at Buffalo, I believe, when New England played at Orchard Park. That game was very competitive, a lot more competitive than most people thought, and if it was not for that fumble New England had that Buffalo returned for a touchdown, New England would have caused an upset that day. So I would think that since they are playing at Gillette Stadium, New England would have a pretty good chance of beating them. And it's very possible Buffalo will just let them win. Josh Allen says he'll start the game, but he's not going to play most of the game, which I don't blame him. This will be a good time to rest up for the playoffs. But as I said, this game doesn't really matter much, but just looking back at what I saw when New England played Buffalo earlier in the season, I don't think it's going to have as much of an impact now that this game doesn't really make any difference to the playoff picture, but I have to take a guess, and I'd say since New England has home field advantage, they're going to be a little bit more competitive than Buffalo, especially seeing that Buffalo is not going to be bringing their A game to the field. So as far as it goes for who's going to win this game, I'm going to go with New England. I think that they will finish the season 4-13. Won't really mean much, but maybe they can get their act together and start to become a good team going into next season, but I'm not counting on it. So then we got Jacksonville Jaguars and Indianapolis Colts. Indianapolis is a decent favorite for this game. Point spread for them is -5. I was wrong about the game with Indianapolis last week. I actually thought they were going to beat the Giants pretty bad, but the Giants actually caused an upset. I feel like that game was kind of Indianapolis beating themselves. They had all those turnovers, and they practically handed New York the game. As far as it goes for this game, since Indianapolis has officially been eliminated from the playoffs, it doesn't really matter for either team. Jacksonville has been able to keep a lot of the divisional games pretty competitive, win or lose. They beat Indianapolis when Indianapolis played them earlier in the season. They beat Tennessee both times they played them, and they almost beat Houston both times they played them earlier in the season, as they were both one-score games. This game, I'm not sure how it's going to go. It could go either way. I mean, Indianapolis is not going to be really trying as hard as they were previous games, and they also might have turnovers that could cost them the game. Jacksonville hadn't been playing too bad with Mac Jones. Not to say that they are playing great, but they are definitely improving from how a lot of people are used to seeing Jacksonville play. And I think with this game, it may be another repeat of that. It could be that Mac Jones is going to come out and he's going to try to win the game, just see how good he is, and maybe rethink how much they want to put him on the field the following season. As far as it goes for this game, I'd say if you want to do point spread on Jacksonville, maybe do a small bet right there, or do money line for Jacksonville if you think that they can pull off another win, finish the season 5-12. Like I said, this game really doesn't matter, so however you bet, I would only put a small number of chips on whoever you bet on for this game, but I have to choose who wins the game. It's kind of a shot in the dark, it's kind of a toss-up, but I'm actually going to go with Jacksonville. I think Mac Jones will do a pretty good job on Sunday, and that Indianapolis, they're like, okay, fine, you can win at this point, we don't care. Indianapolis could win by a field goal, as Jacksonville beat them by a field goal earlier in the season. That's why maybe point spread on Jacksonville would not be a bad bet. But this game really does not matter to me, but I think Mac Jones can do good enough to give them another win. As the season comes to a close, Mac Jones will make Jacksonville not look like the worst team in the NFL. So then we've got Washington Commanders and Dallas Cowboys. Washington is the favorite. Point spread for them is -4.5. So obviously this game matters to Washington. Dallas has been eliminated from the playoffs. Now when it comes to this game, Washington, they've already clinched a playoff berth, and Philadelphia has already clinched the division of NFC East, so Washington knows they're going to be a wild card. So this game, of course, is not to win the division, but it is to get a better wild card spot in the NFC. I believe at the moment, Washington currently is the number 6 seed. It's either going to be Detroit or Minnesota that gets the number 5 seed, which will pretty much be the loser of the Sunday night game. Washington cannot get the number 5 seed. All that they're trying to do at this point is keep themselves from going down to the number 7 seed, which they're pretty much tied with Green Bay right now at 11-5. And Washington knows if they win this game, they've automatically secured that number 6 seed, because if Washington and Green Bay end the season with the same record, Washington breaks the tie, gets the number 6 seed. So I was actually wrong earlier in the season. Dallas played Washington because Washington was supposed to win that game by double digits, and then they lost. That surprised a lot of people, and I'm mad I did not bet money line on Dallas for that game, because I would have won a really good amount of money. But putting that aside, Washington, I do think they will be coming back for revenge, that they definitely were embarrassed by that loss to Dallas earlier in the season. As I've mentioned in previous videos, Dallas has actually done better on the road this season than at home. So when you factor all that in, I think Jaden Daniels, he's going to come out, he's going to be ready to go. And while Atlanta definitely gave them some competition last week, I really do not feel like Dallas will be as much of a challenge for Washington as Atlanta was last week. So as far as who wins this game, I'm going to have to go with Washington on this one. I think they will finish the season 12-5, secure that number 6 seed in the NFC, and could possibly play the winner of NFC West or NFC South, depending on how that goes, which I will get into a little bit later in this video. So then we've got New York Giants and Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia is a slight favorite. Point spread for them is -3. This game really does not matter. The Giants are currently tied with New England and Cleveland and Tennessee for worst record in the NFL. It really doesn't matter at this point. Sure, they got the win against Indianapolis, which did surprise me, and Drew Lock might actually be helping them become a slightly better team, which that's not saying a lot, but I did mention a few weeks ago that I feel like Drew Lock will be a good starting quarterback for the Giants going forward for next season. Philadelphia has already secured the number 2 seed in the NFC. They do not need to win this game, and I do not think they will be trying. They want Jalen Hurts to rest up. I'm not sure if Kenny Pickett will start. We'll kind of see how it goes, but even with Kenny Pickett getting hurt and them bringing in a third-rate quarterback, they still beat the crap out of Dallas last week. Either team's not really going to be trying to win. They're not going to be bringing their A-game to the field. This is more to just kind of try out other players. When it comes to who is going to win this game, I would automatically say the Giants, because I'm thinking, well, the Eagles, they're not going to try to win. They're just going to let the Giants win. But if they do have some of their backup players who did a pretty good job against Dallas playing on Sunday, they could still actually beat them. This game is a toss-up. I would only do a small number of chips on this game, just like most of the other games this week. But as far as who's going to get the W, I've got to pick somebody. It is a toss-up, but I'm going to go with Philadelphia. They will show a lot of people that some of their backup players, who they don't keep on the field as much, are still actually pretty good players, and I do feel like Kenny Pickett is a better quarterback than a lot of people gave him credit for. He definitely impressed me when he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers the previous 2 seasons. He was doing pretty good for a new quarterback. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how that game goes down on Sunday. I'm not going to be paying a great amount of attention to it. So then we've got Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers. Green Bay is a pretty good favorite to win this game. Point spread for them is minus 8.5. Green Bay knows that they have already clinched a playoff berth. They know that they are going to be a wild card, and that's not all their fault. It's just the fact that they're still having a good season. They're just not as good as other teams in their division because, as I mentioned in previous videos, I feel like the NFC North is currently the best division in the NFL, but Green Bay has still impressed a lot of people. They definitely surprised people barely making the playoffs and then being able to beat Dallas in the wild card round of the playoffs and then go on to almost beat San Francisco in the divisional round of the playoffs. As far as it goes for this game, I know Green Bay wants to win this game. If Green Bay and Washington both finish the season with the same record, Washington breaks the tie. I know Green Bay's going to try, and I know Chicago has not really been too tough of a competition lately, and it kind of surprised me because early on in the season, when Chicago was doing pretty good within like the first 5 weeks of the season, I was like, oh, it's possible every team in the NFC North could advance to the playoffs. But then Chicago just got on this losing streak that is still continuing as of today. One thing that definitely will factor into my decision for this game is that Green Bay has a reputation of beating Chicago both times they play them in the season. I feel like this game will be no exception. I think that the Packers will come out. They will be strong. I know that they lost last week, but they still kept that game very competitive against Minnesota. In fact, both times Green Bay played Minnesota this season, they only lost by 2 points. And I think Chicago is going to be a much easier team to beat than Minnesota. So for this game, I'm going with Green Bay. I think they will finish the season 12-5, and depending on how the game goes with Washington and Dallas, Green Bay definitely has secured the number 7 seed. But I know Green Bay wants to do anything they can to avoid being the number 7 seed, because if they are, they've got to play Philadelphia. And if you ask me, I feel like Philadelphia pretty much has Green Bay's number at this point. So the number 6 seed, it's still going to be some competition. It will still be a challenge, but they definitely have a better chance winning the wild card round in the playoffs if they are the number 6 seed in the NFC. So moving on to the afternoon games, we've got Seattle Seahawks and Los Angeles Rams. Seattle is the favorite. Point spread for them is -5. I think a lot of the reason Seattle is the favorite is because Seattle officially has been eliminated from the playoffs, and that kind of sucks because they could finish the season 10-7 and still not go to the playoffs just because everyone who's a wild card in the NFC has a great record, and they just fell short of winning their division. Both teams have definitely been fighting like crazy this season. If you saw some of my videos from earlier in the season, I was saying that the NFC West was Seattle's to lose, and I actually thought that when the Los Angeles Rams 2-star wide receivers got hurt, I was thinking, okay, their season's already over. But they were able to come back. Stafford was able to come out and show that they are still a pretty good team and that their season was not over, and it was definitely an uphill battle. I gotta say props to the Los Angeles Rams because this was definitely not easy, but they were able to pull off the wins that they needed and were able to work their way up to actually winning the NFC West. And it was not all decided by their win against Arizona last week, which I actually thought Arizona was going to beat them and that Seattle and Los Angeles would play each other for the division on Sunday, but that's definitely not going to be the case, which the only impact this game will have on the playoffs is that if Los Angeles wins, they will finish the season 11-6 and be guaranteed that number 3 seed in the NFC. If Los Angeles loses and finishes at 10-7, and then Tampa wins, they will both finish the season 10-7, and then Tampa breaks a tie, and that would put Los Angeles in the number 4 seed for the NFC. Luckily, Tampa plays one of the earlier games, so Los Angeles will be able to see what the result is, and if Tampa loses, Los Angeles can sit that one out. But if they win, they're like, okay, maybe don't bring our A game to the field, but we got to get something going. As far as it goes for this game, though, it'll definitely help to know who wins the game with Tampa. But if I bet, once again, I would only do a small number of chips on whoever I bet on. Maybe point spread on Los Angeles would not be a bad bet, but I'd still do a small number of chips. As far as who wins this game, I'm going to go with Seattle. I think that they will be playing harder. I think that they're definitely trying to get revenge on Los Angeles, even though they are not going to be going to the playoffs. When Los Angeles played Seattle earlier in the season, Seattle was leading in the first half, and it looked like they had the game, but then Los Angeles sneaked up on them, sent it to overtime, and then Los Angeles beat them. So I do think Seattle will put up more competition because of that. Not going to be one of the more interesting games to watch, but it definitely will be more interesting to watch if Tampa wins, just to see who's going to get the number 3 and number 4 seeds in the NFC. So then we've got Miami Dolphins and New York Jets. Miami is a small favorite for this game. Point spread for them is minus 1.5. So the Jets obviously are out of the season. I don't even know why they're trying to keep their good players in the game, because it doesn't make any difference if they win. This game is actually very important to Miami, and Miami has to win this game to just stay in the hunt for the playoffs, to still keep their playoff chances alive of getting that number 7 seed in the NFC. Tua Tagovailoa, I think that's how you say his name, he is questionable for this game, and he is the glue that holds that team together. I know they still did fine. They still won the game last week against Cleveland, but keep in mind, that is Cleveland. This game pretty much focuses around whether or not Tua is there to play or not. Even without Tua, I just really think that the Jets will still play like the Jets. I know that when New York played Miami earlier this season, it was very competitive. The game went to overtime, but Miami ended up winning the game. I'm not sure if this game will be similar. I think that really the Jets are going to play like the Jets, and that their only reason to win the game is to keep Miami out of the playoffs. So I know Miami will definitely be playing harder than New York this game, and even with their backup quarterback, I just think that the Dolphins won't play great, but that the Jets will play like the Jets, which means that as far as who wins the game, I'm going to go with Miami on this one. I think that they will be able to finish the season 9-8 and keep their playoff chances alive for the AFC. So then we've got Kansas City Chiefs and Denver Broncos. Denver is actually the favorite to win this game. Point spread for them is minus 11. Now, Patrick Mahomes is going to be sitting out this game, and their backup, Carson Wentz, is going to be playing this game. So obviously, the only reason that Denver is the favorite is because Kansas City, they're at 15-1. They've secured the number 1 seed in the AFC. They can just sit this game out, rest it up, and just throw some of their other players on the field, kind of see how they play. Obviously, I would not bet a high number of chips on anything this game. I would only bet a small number of chips regardless of who you bet on. Like, if you want to do point spread on Kansas City for this game, since it's plus 11, that may not be a bad bet. Even though they'll probably let Denver win, Denver may not necessarily blow up the scoreboard. And also, if you bet money line on Kansas City for this game, once again, it doesn't really matter, so I'd only do a small number of chips on money line for Kansas City, but it's currently plus 450 on ESPN odds, so $20 would give you $90. Not that it really matters for this game. The thing about this game is that Denver needs it a lot more than Kansas City, because if Denver wins this game, they secure the number 7 seed in the AFC. So for Kansas City, they could let Denver win, and then they know that they're getting that last seed in the AFC. So pretty much their strategy at this point is going to be who they want to play Buffalo in the wild card round in the playoffs, because whoever gets the number 7 seed is going to be playing Buffalo, because they have secured the number 2 seed in the AFC. So Denver plays Buffalo, probably Buffalo will beat them. But then if Denver loses and Miami wins, Miami gets the number 7 seed. Buffalo plays Miami. They'll probably beat them, especially if Tua's not playing. The only other team that could take the number 7 seed if both Denver and Miami lose but Cincinnati wins, we're going to see a rematch of Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. While I do think that Buffalo would be able to beat them just with how those teams have been playing this season, I feel like the only team that has a chance at causing an upset with Buffalo in the wild card round in the playoffs at this point out of those 3 teams would be Cincinnati. So Cincinnati causes an upset with Buffalo. Cincinnati plays Kansas City. Well, I do think Kansas City would beat them. They do always struggle against Cincinnati, win or lose, and they're always one-score games. Earlier in the season, even though Kansas City beat Cincinnati, they only beat them by 1 point. Honestly, I feel like that game could have gone to overtime. That loss for Cincinnati was self-inflicted, as it would have gone to overtime if they hadn't missed that extra point on one of the touchdowns they made that game. But as far as it goes for this game, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about it. I'm just trying to kind of see what Kansas City's strategy would be here. Obviously, they don't care about losing. They're going to sit this one out. They get the bye week and the playoffs next week, and then they will come back a lot stronger than ever in the divisional round. Andy Reid will be all ready to start the postseason. Plus, their offense is going to be in a lot better shape than they have been most of the season, just because certain players have been out here and there. So I kind of think Kansas City's a powerhouse team, that they are on their way to that three-peat. I don't see any way that any team could stop Kansas City from having the three-peat, but we'll get more into that as we get into the videos. Enough about that for now. As far as it goes for this game, I know that it's very possible they could let Denver win, but last season, when they really weren't trying to win their final game in Week 18 against the Los Angeles Chargers, they were already at 10-6. They had already secured the number 3 seed in the AFC. Win or lose, that game did not change where they would be in the playoffs. But guess what? They still beat Los Angeles that game. I believe it was only by 1 point, but they still won. So for this game, as far as who wins, I'm still going to go with Kansas City on this one. Maybe I'm being slightly biased, but I do not care. No matter what, I'm not going to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But as I mentioned, if you do want to place any bets on this game, please only do a small number of chips. So then we've got Los Angeles Chargers and Las Vegas Raiders. Los Angeles is the favorite. Point spread for them is -5.5. The season's over for Las Vegas. This game does not matter to them. But Los Angeles, on the other hand, this game can matter to them. They have already secured the number 6 seed in the AFC. If Pittsburgh loses on Saturday, and then Los Angeles wins this game, they move up to the number 5 seed in the AFC, and then they'll be playing Houston, which is really the position you want to be in if you're going to be a wild card in the AFC. Obviously, if they're the number 6 seed, they'll end up playing Baltimore or Pittsburgh, depending on who wins the AFC North, which at this point it's looking pretty good for Baltimore, and I know Los Angeles does not want to play Baltimore again, despite that I will still enjoy seeing a rematch with the Harbaugh brothers. As far as it goes for this game, Las Vegas has not been playing horrible lately. They've actually won the last 2 games, but who did Las Vegas beat? Jacksonville and New Orleans. They got a couple of wins, but that's really not saying a lot. Plus, I do feel like Los Angeles will be more of a challenge this game. And as we've seen with Las Vegas this season, having home field advantage is not really an advantage for them. It's not really going to make them play better. Los Angeles knows that Las Vegas is not a tough team to beat, and I know that they really want to get that number 5 seed in the AFC. It could be a close game. It probably will not be the blowout win they had against New England last week, but as far as it goes for who gets the win, I'm going to go with Los Angeles on this one. I think they will finish the season 11-6. I think they will keep their chances alive at possibly getting the number 5 seed in the AFC, but it will definitely be interesting to see how Baltimore and Pittsburgh play in this week's games. So then we've got San Francisco 49ers and Arizona Cardinals. Arizona is the favorite. Point spread for them is -4. This game does not really matter. Both the teams, they've tried this season, but they fell short. But they were both at a point in the season where they had a chance at winning the NFC West, as that division has been very competitive. It's been a huge roller coaster. Unfortunately, they cannot pull off enough wins to make the playoffs. That's not to say that they cannot be counted out future seasons, because San Francisco, obviously, they haven't been playing horrible. Their team has just been too banged up. And while Arizona hasn't been a great team this season, they've still been playing better than what a lot of us are used to seeing out of them. So as far as it goes for this game, Arizona does have home field advantage. Since point spread is -4, I would not bet point spread on them just because they could could still win by a field goal, but it really doesn't matter. But like most of the games this week, I would only put a small number of chips on this game. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because it's not going to make any difference for the NFC playoff picture, but I have to choose somebody. I do think it's kind of a toss-up, but because the Cardinals have home field advantage, I'm going to go with Arizona on this one. I think they will finish the season at 8-9. While they are not going to be in the playoffs, they will at least be able to prove we didn't finish as a bad team. We finished more as a mediocre team. Arizona will definitely be interesting to watch in upcoming seasons. So moving on to the final game of the week, the Sunday night game. We've got Minnesota Vikings and Detroit Lions. Detroit is the favorite for this game. Point spread for them is -3. So this will definitely be the most exciting game of the week, in my opinion. I automatically knew before they released the schedule for Week 18 that this would be the game they would save for last. Both Minnesota and Detroit are obviously having an incredible season. They're both at 14-2. This game is not just about getting an extra win, and it's not just about determining who wins the NFC North, the best division in the NFL. This game is also about who gets the number 1 seed in the NFC and gets the bye week next week in the playoffs. It's definitely going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm certainly going to enjoy it. I could go on and on about what advantages and disadvantages the teams have. The way I see it is that even though Detroit's had a banged up defense, they were still able to pull off the win against San Francisco last week, even though they were struggling in the first half. And as far as it goes for this game, they could definitely struggle against Minnesota. However, when Detroit played Minnesota earlier in the season, I actually thought Minnesota would win that game. There's something about it that when the teams are playing at US Bank Stadium, the home field advantage really helps for Minnesota. But Minnesota still lost the game, even though it was only by 2 points. So this game could also be very close. But Minnesota is playing at Ford Field this time. So I do think having home field advantage will help Detroit a little bit more, but I do not know if it will be by a lot. This game is definitely going to be a nail-biter, and I'm definitely going to enjoy watching it. As far as it goes for who gets the win, it's possible that Detroit's banged-up defense could allow a lot of points for the Minnesota offense. But then again, the Detroit offense has still been really good and has still been able to put a lot of points on the scoreboard. This will really come down to who the better offense is. Now, Detroit up to this point in the season has been perfect in their divisional games. They won both times they played Chicago. They won both times they played Green Bay. They won when they played Minnesota earlier this season. So I think they can finish the season with a perfect 6-0 when it comes to divisional games. While I do think it will be competitive, I do think it's a toss-up, which means that I would only do a small number of chips on this game. You could do point spread for Detroit since they could win by a field goal. Seeing how Minnesota has won or lost to a team by only 2 points, I would be careful doing the -3 on the point spread. So maybe doing money line on Detroit would be a good bet. But I would only do a small to medium number of chips on this game. And when it comes to who is going to get the win, I'm going with Detroit on this one. I think they'll be able to play just as good, if not better, than when they played Minnesota earlier in the season. They want to finish the season off strong. And I think, honestly, if they lose this game, it will be more Dan Campbell taking some of those gambles that they shouldn't be doing, as those gambles cost him the NFC Championship last season. So he could go for that. He may, or he may not. Even though Detroit's not in a good position right now with their defense, I do still think that they will be able to win the game as long as Dan Campbell does not make a lot of bad calls. So those are my picks and predictions for NFL Week 18. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment, and I will see you in the next video for NFL picks and predictions. My name is Napoleon, and I'm in the closet. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Check out some of the other content we have on this page, and make sure to subscribe so you are always notified when new content becomes available on this channel. And I will see you in the next video.